I was told by my grandfather, he came over here in the 1920s from China, Canton, the southern part, the poorest part of the country, that's where he's from. He came here on his own to establish a business. And then later he brought his family over, his wife, my grandmother. I think from San Francisco, he went to somewhere in the Midwest by train, and he stopped. He waited. They told him to get off the train because he was to make a connecting train the next day. He didn't know that. So at the end of the day, the station people took him to the local Chinese laundry in the town. And they took him in for the evening. And the next day they gave him a box of chicken, and they sent them off, and he ended up going to Jacksonville, Florida. But it's just amazing to think about it, that someone like that will have enough nerve to come to a country who he doesn't even know the language at all. From there, he had a store. They started their grocery store business in Jacksonville, Florida. And then later he moved up to the Washington area. My father was born in China, Canton, China. He came here when he was 16, and he thought he was going to go to school, but my grandfather put him to work right away. So my father and my mother met in Florida, and my mother was really impressed with my father. She was impressed with him because in looking at old pictures of them, it reminds me of Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. That's the way how they were dressed back then. So he was a dapper gentleman, and my mother was really enamored with him. And from then on, I think about a year or so, they eventually got married. And then we moved up to the Washington area in the late 40s. And that's about as far as I remember.
My father came from Toisan, China. He got on a boat roughly around 1936, 37, and he took that long boat ride across the ocean. And so that's how my father came here. He came as a paper son to my great-grandfather. A paper son is an immigrant who came over here on false papers, or papers that were bought or sold to show that he had a relationship with someone over here in the States. Like most immigrants, my dad came first, to start a living, find a job, a business, whatever he could do to establish himself. And then later on, he would bring my mother over.
My grandfather came here and had a laundry business in Washington, D.C. I don't remember how far back, but my father came here through my grandfather. Actually, my family has been coming back and forth from China, from southern China for many generations. I believe my family worked on the railroads, from what my parents told me and what my grandparents told them. After the railroads, they migrated to various living areas, and so a lot of them, a lot of the Chinese people who came to Washington, D.C. centered around the original Chinatown. And my grandfather was part of that original Chinatown, which was not where it is a 7th and H. It was on Pennsylvania Avenue. It was in a different location. I remember at times my father talked about that, but not much. My grandfather was there, and a lot of the Chinese were there, and the Lee Association started during the original Chinatown.
The Lee Association is made up of all the Lees who came from China. The Lee Association started the Lee's Federal Credit Union, So all the Lees start borrowing money from the credit union to buy their first home or second home and start a business.
It was a way for the Chinese men to have camaraderie, to help each other. It was a support system. And my grandfather was part of that network.
My grandfather came in 1935. I believe he came into San Francisco originally. He and his brothers came to work on the railroads. I think he was following that dream that there's gold in America. They came from poor villages, so the idea that you could get rich quick and that you just had to work hard and you could bring all this wealth back to China and live as somebody very important. I think that's what brought my grandfather into the U.S. He worked his way over, and I'm not sure where he stopped in between. He had cousins in New York City, so he came down to Washington, D.C. because he wanted to file to bring his family over, and it just took a long time. Then he brought his entire family over around 1949.
I was born in China. I came to this country in 1948. Then I went into the immigration detention center in San Francisco. There's where I was stay for almost 5 to 6 months. At that time, it's necessary for you to go through. I was born in China, but my father need not to be there because he was already a citizen of USA. There was a lot of people. People sleep on a bunk bed, 3 levels up, things like that. The women and children are not in the same area, but the men by themselves in one area. We were scheduled to be questioned by the immigration officers maybe several times a week.